Movies are nearly always missing pieces of the story, and the story of Harry Potter is no different. There are many moments that were expanded on in the books that were either missing from the movie's version altogether or were mentioned so quickly, and the entire story was never told. Here are 8 dark events that were not explained in the Harry Potter movie series. Our first moment is when Bill Weasley was attacked by Fenrir Greyback at the end of The Half-Blood Prince. While in the movies, the scars on his face are a quick mention when Harry meets Bill for the first time. In reality, Harry had met the eldest Weasley years before that moment. After Harry and Dumbledore had gotten back from the cave where the Locket Horcrux had been hidden, the two found that Death Eaters had infiltrated the school, and this was the moment where Albus Dumbledore accepted his death and was murdered by Severus Snape, all of which we get to witness in the movie. However, what is skipped over from the book's tale was that Fenrir Greyback, whom Draco had not expected to be at the school with the rest of the Death Eaters, used more than spells when attacking the Order members. With his nails that he had sharpened to a point, allowing himself to look more like a werewolf even in his human form, he left the 3 large scratch marks down the side of Bill's face. And despite being in his human form, werewolf injuries can never fully heal. Thanks to the efforts of Madame Pomfrey, the bleeding was stopped, and Bill would be perfectly fine. Many thought the scars suited him for his dangerous career of being a curse breaker. Though Molly thought differently of the scars, as they ruined her son's handsome face and he was to be married. This event cemented the fear that everyone had been holding inside. Sirius's death had been a terrible tragedy, but this was the first attack since that moment. Dumbledore was dead, and Bill was lying in a hospital bed. The Order of the Phoenix began to feel how real the fact was that not everyone would make it through the war. Another dark moment that was glossed over in the movies was the torture of Muggles during the Quidditch World Cup. While the movies portrayed the terrifying feeling of Death Eaters storming the campsites and leveling tents to the ground, the secluded area where the Quidditch World Cup took place was not completely deserted. The Muggle family who owned the land was charged with renting out the tent space to witches and wizards that had come from all over to see this magnificent event. All they had to do was tell the arriving wizards to which area their campsite would be. The Quidditch pitch was shielded with many charms to keep any Muggles from being able to see the grand event. However, after end of the game, after Victor Crumb captured the Golden Snitch and giving Ireland the win off the Quidditch World Cup, a march of wizards came through the campsite. Wizards dressed in dark cloaks and wearing masks. Tents were set ablaze as they were in the movie. However, not every tent was burned, as the Weasley family and friends were able to stay the night before returning home. A few tents were set on fire, while the wizards were more interested in the 4 beings that were being levitated above their heads. Roberts, the Muggle man who owned the land, and his wife and children were being tortured and tormented for all to see as the wizards marched through the campsite. The family was spun around like tops and bounced through the air, still in their nightwear. More and more people joined the crowd, laughing at the family as if they were a spectacle. Only those who thought the event to be horrible tried to stop the dark wizards, or took to the woods to keep safe. The night ended with the dark mark appearing in the sky, and the family being returned to their home to be treated for injuries and their memories modified. Next, as the war continued to become more imminent and the Order of the Phoenix prepared for the worst, including creating a safe house for their meetings and communications, Molly Weasley and her family temporarily moved into 12 Grimmauld Place in order to clean up the house and make it inhabitable for the Order members. After confirmation from Alastor Moody, Molly took it upon herself to get rid of a boggart that was hiding in a writing desk up in the drawing room. However, she was not prepared for the image of her greatest fear. She had been spending the weeks leading up to taking on the boggart hiding and burying her fears. Molly Weasley had put her focus into helping her family and making sure they were safe as they began their work for the Order. She didn't have time to think of her own fears. When she released the boggart from the desk, with the intent to get rid of it from the house, the being turned into her worst fear. Though it cycled through her fear. Her entire family, dead. It showed her slowly, almost one by one, her loved ones dead at her feet. Each attempt at using the ridiculous charm to control the boggart failed as she was not executing the charm with enough strength and caused the boggart to change into a different family member. Ron, Bill, Arthur, Fred and George, Percy, and even Harry. Though the book did not include Ginny and Charlie, it was safe to assume that the boggart had not gotten to them yet, or that it happened before Harry and the other Order members had come into the room to assist Mrs. Weasley. Finally, after Harry had watched Molly attempt to rid the boggart herself several times, he tried to get her away from the boggart. Remus Lupin put himself between Molly and the boggart, forcing it to change into the full moon. He was then swiftly able to rid the boggart from the home. Even after watching her family lay dead before her, Molly Weasley attempted to pretend like it was nothing, as if she hadn't been thinking of that very possibility since Voldemort's return earlier that summer. Her family was far too close to Harry Potter to not be involved, and that meant she was stuck with the very real possibility that her family would not come out of this war in one piece. A death that was never explained in the movies was that of Peter Pettigrew. While this man deserves no sympathy due to the number of times he had betrayed his friends, first leading to the deaths of Lily and James Potter, then allowing Sirius Black to sit in Azkaban for 12 years after faking his own death, allowing Sirius to take the fall a second time after he escaped from Hogwarts, helping Voldemort return to power, and finally attempting to kill Harry Potter. While Harry Potter was looking for Horcruxes with Ron and Hermione, Peter Pettigrew had been left to assist Voldemort at Malfoy Manor. Lord Voldemort had taken the family home as his headquarters, and such, used it for holding his prisoners and doing his interrogations. Over the course of almost 2 years, Voldemort had taken Garrick Ollivander, who he needed to find a wand that would not fight against harming Harry Potter. Luna Lovegood, who he took to punish her father for the terrible things that Xenophilius had been writing about Voldemort in the Quibbler. Griphook and Dean Thomas, who had been captured in conjunction with the capture of Harry Potter and his friends, as well as Charity Burbage, the professor for Muggle studies at Hogwarts, who he killed as an example of his hatred for Muggles and allowed Nagini to consume the body for a meal. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione were trapped at Malfoy Manor, they worked to escape, leading to the death of Peter Pettigrew. When Harry attempted to overpower Pettigrew to get his wand, Peter Pettigrew was winning and was moments away from killing the boy. With his metal hand, a gift from Voldemort for his loyalty, wrapped around Harry Potter's throat, he could have killed the famous Harry Potter, and Voldemort's biggest obstacle would be gone. Harry attempts to save himself by not begging for his life, but pointing out that Harry was the reason that Pettigrew was still alive and that he owed him. Sirius Black and Remus Lupin intended to murder Pettigrew years back, and Harry had stopped them. Pettigrew owed Harry for saving his life. Hearing this, Peter Pettigrew hesitated. And though it was only for a moment, it was just long enough for the magic hand, the gift from the Dark Lord, to know that Pettigrew had betrayed his master. Doing so, the magical hand turned itself back onto Pettigrew. Peter Pettigrew began to strangle himself, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Harry Potter and Ron Weasley attempted to stop the hand as well, but the magic placed over it was far stronger than either of the teenagers. During their time at school, there was a dark moment from Fred and George Weasley that no one would have expected to see. Though it is speculated that this was a minor case of bullying that turned into something so much more due to the twins' inexperience of the object. When Dolores Umbridge was busy taking over the school and she appointed students to the inquisitorial squad, Graham Montague was one of the Slytherin students who jumped at the opportunity to receive extra credit points and gain more authority throughout the halls of the school. Graham was attempting to take house points away from Fred and George when the two threw him into a cabinet in order to get away from him. This specific cabinet was a vanishing cabinet that linked to its sister cabinet inside Borgin and Burke's. However, none of the students knew that this cabinet had magical properties, or that it was broken. The cabinet had been damaged 3 years earlier, when Peeves had dropped the cabinet in a classroom in order to create a disturbance and distract the caretaker, Argus Filch. The broken piece of furniture was then moved into a corridor on the first floor until this event had occurred. When Fred and George shoved Graham Montague into the vanishing cabinet, it was meant for them to get away and avoid losing any house points from the boy. It was a busy corridor, and he was supposed to be found quickly. However, because they did not know that the cabinet was magic, when they closed the door, it was to teleport Montague to the twin cabinet at Borgin and Burke's. And because they also did not know that this magic piece of furniture was broken, there was no way of knowing that when Montague entered the cabinet that he would be trapped between the two cabinets. Being trapped between the two locations, he could hear what was going on around the cabinet, both at Hogwarts and the shop in Knockturn Alley. Finally, out of desperation to escape, Graham was able to escape the void he was trapped in by apparating back to the school. This was flawed due to him having not taken his apparition test yet, and caused him to transport himself into the toilet on the 4th floor of Hogwarts. Luckily, he was found by Draco Malfoy, and Professor Snape was able to extract him from the plumbing. Graham spent months in the hospital wing trying to recover from what happened. Once he had recovered, he had told others what happened, and this led to Draco understanding that the Vanishing Cabinet connected Hogwarts to the outside world in a way that would be easy to sneak in. Another death that is overlooked is that of Regulus Black. Regulus had admired Voldemort from a young age and believed all that his parents had taught him about blood status and supremacy. And the young Slytherin had received the Dark Mark at the age of 16, much to his parents' approval. While Orion and Walburga Black were never Death Eaters themselves, they agreed on much that he was doing and supported their son joining the cause to create the pure blood world that they believed in. This was a great relief compared to their other son who had been sorted into Gryffindor and was associating with half-breeds and Muggle-borns. After Regulus became a Death Eater, he was quick to begin questioning his decisions. It began when Voldemort mistreated and intended to murder the family house elf, Kreacher. Voldemort had ordered Regulus Black to allow him to borrow his house elf, to which Regulus agreed to, thinking nothing of it. Upon his house elf's return, he learned of Voldemort's strange requests of the elf. He had taken Kreacher to a cave where he wanted the elf to test a potion that he had used to protect a locket. After forcing the elf to drink all of the potion, confirming that the potion had the correct torturous effect that he was looking for, Voldemort left the elf to die. Thanks to Kreacher's elf magic, he was able to return to the Black family home and explain everything that had happened to Regulus. The teenager was able to work out why this locket was so important to Voldemort and why the Dark Lord had to protect it so carefully. After a bit of his own research, he was able to discover that Voldemort had turned the locket into a Horcrux and that it was the reason for his immortality. This was the moment that caused Regulus Black to defect from the Death Eaters, and what ultimately led to his untimely death. Regulus made a copy of the locket and ordered Kreacher to take him to the same cave. The family house elf was able to lead him through the cave and its other defenses all the way up to the same basin that Kreacher had drank from. Regulus could not force Kreacher to drink the potion again, and instead left him with one last order. After the potion was gone, Kreacher was to replace the locket with the copy and take the Horcrux, to leave the cave without him if necessary and find any way to destroy the locket. Drinking the potion of despair, Regulus was consumed with pain and awful memories. It felt as if his entire body was burning, and he was reliving the worst memories he had. He attempted to drink from the lake, to wash down the potion and quench his thirst while Kreacher swapped the two lockets. As he reached for the water, Regulus was grabbed by a creature within the water and dragged into the lake. Kreacher followed his master's last order and disappeared from the cave, and this left Regulus to attempt to free himself from the Inferi, a reanimated corpse from the darkest of magic, as more and more of them dragged him to the bottom of the lake. Regulus Black drowned, alone in the dark cave as he fought to get back to the surface of the water, but the only person that knew he was there had followed his last order to leave. Back at Hogwarts during the Triwizard Tournament, Rita Skeeter had made a horrid habit of writing whatever she pleased. Whether it was fact or fiction did not matter to her. Hermione Granger had called the woman out on her lies, which led the journalist to, in turn, write a scathing article about Hermione. This article claimed that Hermione was discovering a taste for famous wizards, jumping from Harry Potter to Victor Crumb, and was gaining their attention despite being a plain girl. This article also threw out the idea that Hermione was using love potions in order to get the attention of these boys. Hermione Granger set out to get revenge on the woman, as her article had led to her receiving hate mail, and even had Mrs. Weasley convinced that she was a horrible person. Hermione set out to figure out how Rita Skeeter was gaining so much information for her articles, as much of what she was writing about happened during private conversations that she would have had no way of knowing about. She finally came to suspect that Rita Skeeter was an illegal animagus. It was the only way to explain how she was spying on private conversations. Hermione discovered a beetle in the hospital wing. The antennae were curled just like the woman's hair, and the beetle almost looked to be wearing glasses. Hermione was able to capture Rita Skeeter in her animagus form, and by doing so prevented the journalist from being able to transform back into her normal form. With the unbreakable charm, Rita Skeeter was forced to stay in her animagus form for approximately a week. She released Rita Skeeter from the jar once they had left school and returned to London, where she was able to blackmail the journalist. Rita was to stop writing for a year, or Hermione Granger would inform the ministry that she was an unregistered animagus. And Rita Skeeter remained quiet until she was called back out to writing by Hermione Granger herself in February of the following year. Hogwarts is filled with ghosts of many backgrounds, and each having their own tragic reason as to why they are trapped to roam halls of Hogwarts forever. Witches and wizards that became ghosts had something that held them to the mortal world, whether it be fear of death, unfinished business, or regrets that kept them tied to the mortal world. Those that chose not to move on would become ghosts, where they often would be trapped at a location that meant a great deal to them. They knew nothing of the afterlife as they made the choice not to move on. The tragic death and the events that lead to two ghosts that roamed through Hogwarts, the Bloody Baron and the Grey Lady, who ultimately became the house ghosts of Slytherin and Ravenclaw. The Baron, born of nobility, was one part of the first generation of students to attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. At this time, the school was still being run by the four founders. During his time at school, the Baron had the opportunity to meet the lovely Helena Ravenclaw, daughter of the founder Rowena Ravenclaw. The Baron fell in love with the woman, though she always rejected his advances. Helena was also among the first students to attend Hogwarts and was sorted into Ravenclaw under her mother's teachings. She never found herself to fall in love, as no man ever met her incredibly high standards that Helena held for a partner. During her time at school, Helena was envious of her mother's great wisdom and cleverness. Helena stole her mother's infamous diadem, taking it for herself with the belief that the diadem would allow her to gain enough intelligence to surpass her mother. Rowena never admitted to the other founders of her daughter's betrayal, or the fact that the diadem was no longer in her possession. Shortly after her daughter's departure, Rowena fell fatally ill and wished to see her daughter once more before she died. Rowena Ravenclaw requested the Baron, who she knew loved her daughter, to go and search for her and bring her back before she died. Helena did her best to hide from her mother and from the Baron. However, she knew that he was catching up to her while she was in a forest in Albania. Before the Baron found her, she hid the diadem in a hollow tree, determined to keep the heirloom from returning to her mother. The Baron pleaded with Helena to return to Scotland with him. Helena rejected him again. This sent the Baron into a fit of rage. She had never once returned his affection, not even in the form of a friendship. And even now, with her mother only moments from death, and him wanting nothing more than the two to have one last memory together, Helena rejects him again. The Baron took his knife and stabbed Helena, furious at her rejection and envious of her freedom. After seeing the aftermath of his rage and standing over Helena's now dead body, the Baron could not handle what he had done and in turn stabbed himself as well. Helena Ravenclaw returned to Hogwarts as she was never able to get what she wanted. She wasn't able to surpass her mother, and now her diadem was left in that Albanian forest. It is possible that she feared dying, or found that she had unfinished business with her plans. She resided herself in the Ravenclaw Tower, keeping rather quiet to those who weren't sorted into the house. Student adopted the nickname of the Grey Lady for her, as she always seemed so quiet and timid. The Baron returned to Hogwarts as a ghost with the great amount of guilt he felt. He had killed the woman he loved, and could not bring himself to move on knowing the deed he had committed. He became the house ghost to Slytherin, and he was very secretive to how he died. With no explanation of his death and him looking to be covered in blood, he was given the moniker of the Blood Baron. These 8 events were hardly discussed or mentioned within the movies of Harry Potter. The tragic deaths that were overlooked and the dark events that happened, whether intentional or not, expand the world of Harry Potter greatly and cause us to look at characters differently. What other events from the books were missing from the movies? Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more untold tales of the magical world of Harry Potter.